guy in the background singing is Dave. It's absurdly early on a Saturday morning, and we're about to change the transmission out on the race car for the final race of the year. The transmission inside the car let go at the last race, but we happen to have a well-prepared transmission in queue, so we're going to be throwing it in. Along with it, we're going to be upgrading a few things along the way. So is the race life. And as you can see, doing this on a Saturday is somewhat interesting because the shop's very, very full. So we're about to pull the transmission out of Dave's car. This is his water pump. Dave runs this crazy coolant that has effectively no boiling point. And when you use this coolant, one thing about it, or fancy pulleys, you have to plug the weep hole because it leaks out of it if you don't. So effectively, even after the going back out on the track with transmission problems, it still didn't destroy the gearing.
Initially, it would go into fifth.
Yeah.
And then occasionally it would pop out, and then it was going with more and more frequency. But before that, I kept getting. Remember, I couldn't get into first.
Right.
And then I couldn't. Then I would get first, and I couldn't get second, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I just kept going. Because basically, once you're actually out on track, I don't use anything but third, fourth, and fifth.
Right.
Because using second at the bottom of the hill is too much. You know, it's a pointless gear at the bottom of 3B.
I go into 3A and shift from fourth to second.
Yeah. See,
and second takes real nice between. I mean, I pull out a 3A and head to 3B. I mean, it's like
I'm boggy. If I go down into second, I've got, it's like, second, and I'm in second for a couple of seconds before I pop into third. So I now just drag race out of it in third gear and...
Yeah. Now, but all fairness, the leading edges of some of these gears has got an edge to them.
I wouldn't doubt that some of these...
So that's the broken bit there, yeah? That piece.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
Well, there's just a little bit of edging. No, some of them have a bit of a chew to them.
Oh, go back and... That bit that
this is all chewed right here.
And that thing's popped out, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's when we started pulling those out of the drain. I'm going, wow. I totally expected to see mass carnage in here, and somehow it all fell to the bottom and did not destroy these gears.
Let's see. We're just going to put it into first.
I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't have a bunch of messed up gears in here.
Kind of good that they aren't. It gets expensive.
Well, it was very selfish of me. I'm just saying.
Didn't want to go into first.
That was my...
Essentially, these are the synchro parts that let go in the race car. Effectively, fifth gear is non-existent. These are the components that were inside the actual casing. They were all sitting at the bottom of the casing and mysteriously somehow did not destroy the gears themselves. That is effectively what is called racing. So we were going to retire this transmission anyway for an upgraded, lightened model with better ratios. But you don't race if you are not willing to fix stuff. As things seem to go, our race car is coming along nicely. We made a lot of progress on Saturday. We put in the new lightened transmission. You saw all the synchro damage and, amazingly enough, no gear damage on the previous transmission. Now, the previous transmission was really just a stock transmission, and I want to take a few seconds to talk about that. Now, this particular transmission that's in here now is a 2-liter transmission, but however, it is just a stock transmission with lightened gears, and effectively that is all it is. The relationship of the transmission and the differential are somewhat critical for good performance on the racetrack. Now, there's algorithms out there to support what you should be running. Now, inevitably, what we will be doing is we will be putting in a close ratio transmission in this car, but we're not going to do that until the off season. So we're going to put a close ratio transmission in this car. Now, with that said, you need to be very aware of what is in the differential. Now, there's no point in putting in a close ratio gearbox in a car that needs to be a highway flyer. So if you have a 410 differential with a close ratio GTA gearbox, it's kind of counterproductive. However, if you have a close ratio gearbox with a 356 differential, now you have something that is more out for good trackside performance. It's going to keep those torque values up, and it's going to get you in and out of the turns far more aggressively. But it's not ideal for top end speed because you're going to really have that motor way up there on the RPM band. So the relationship of the differential to the transmission is imperative, and you have to think that process all the way through. On street environment, for example, in my personal car, I have a lightened rifle board, coated gears, GTA close ratio setup transmission in my car, and I'm running a 430 differential. It's kind of the best of both worlds. It's not too high up on the RPM band on freeway flying. However, I have very good performance on the low end as well. But 430 differentials in this country are really hard to come by because, as far as we know, they are only available for the Berlina's European spec. So we just don't see them unless the car was imported or the gears are brought in. Anyway, in this particular case, we'll inevitably have a 356 with what we have now with a close ratio box. It's really going to affect the overall track time. But for now, just to get through the last season, this is my backup street transmission for my personal use that we're putting in this car to get us through the race this weekend. And after that, in the off season, we're going to do some more upgrading of this car, further development, and we're probably going to start with a different transmission. This race car is kind of unique in comparison to just about any other race car out there because we are still on Spica in this car. The fiercest, most highest performance Spica still has its drawbacks. We still have yet to find a resolution for that top end fuel leaning out that a Spica does. But if you remove that small portion of the equation, Spica has proven to be a far superior fuel delivery system on just about every application. Granted, it's not as sexy looking as a nice set of Webers, but it is a very effective tool. It does have its limitations on horsepower build and on the top end if you're full throttling one of these motors. But for now, this is a very fine and race developed Spica system. It is a good system. This system would work for just about anybody. It's just that you need to know at the end of the day, on the very top end of the fuel delivery, it will lean out in comparison to what Webers would do. This is a very competitive car. It is a fantastic car. It is a very well-built car. We just have a few little things to do, and it will be quite a significant portion to the racing in the Northwest. No way! The most overdeveloped Berlina in the country. From the guy who doesn't know how to leave well enough alone. This is the age-old problem of too big is just simply too big. We have these massive 45s with massive jets and velocity stacks and all these wonderful things, but at the end of the day, it's got gigantic chokes in it. I'm going to turn this on so you can hear what I'm saying. I'm bringing this idle down. I'm looking at my meter, which is behind you. Bringing this idle down right now about 1,000. We'll settle it out about 950. Anyway, what you have here is a typical, normal, nothing crazy, 2-liter motor with, quite frankly, absurd carburetors. It has DCOE 45s on it. I run DCO 45s on my particular car, but my car has a really well-developed head with massive valves, big cams, upsized pistons, a ported head. Everything about my motor justifies having it. Bigger is not necessarily always better. Save the jokes for later. In this particular case, it really isn't better. You have 45s with 36mm chokes on it, massive jets. These things have been gone through 100 times, looks like, by somebody, because the jets are kind of marred up from flyer marks, and the emulsion tubes are a little beat up. Everything about these carburetors is a little bit tired, and it's all because obviously somebody was trying to make these big old carburetors work on this normal motor. 45mm carburetors are a great thing, but at the end of the day, you've got to have the right application for them, and this ain't it. 45s on this particular motor is just simply too much. Believe it or not, you're going to get far more responsiveness, better power performance, better acceleration. Everything about this motor is going to be better when we get rid of these 45s and put on some 40s. 40s with 32mm chokes, the appropriate jetting, this thing is going to behave. Right now, this motor is shaking all the hell. We try to jet it and we try to work with it. There's no point putting smaller and smaller chokes in, because effectively you have 45mm carburetors for a reason. You need that massive air. In this particular case, on a normal, undeveloped head, this is too much. So today we're going to change out this carburetor for something a little more reasonable. We're going to put some 40s on there instead. Italian-made 40s, might I add, instead of these Spanish-made 45s. With 32mm chokes, appropriate jetting, and we're going to watch this motor become far more civilized. Right now, I have an exhaust tube going out the back of the shop, because this thing runs so rich that it'll burn your eyes. So let's get started. Alright, so once again, excuse the noise. We are a shop, we do business, and today is paint day, so you're going to hear a lot of noise in the background. Nothing I can do about it. Anyway, with that said, these are the 45s that just came off that car. As you can see, looking back here, there's been an awful lot of backfiring through the block towards the carburetors. That's why you see all this blackness in here. That's because there is an inefficient performance of these carburetors is the reason. The timing is fine, there's no valve leakage, nothing in the world other than these carburetors are just, again, too doggone big. And sometimes people, they want what they want at any cost. And these 45s, quite frankly, are just too stupidly big for this car. So as you can see, it has been working well. We've already pulled the jets out, and they're too big. They got plier marks on them. They've been kind of manhandled a little bit. And, you know, there's just a lot of things about this that isn't working out too well. However, there's a couple things I do want to point out. When you're running carburetors without a factory filter box, there's no ideal way for a proper return spring to pull the throttle linkage back up. Now, we have been getting these in from California, and they're really nice, and it's a simple way of approaching it. It's just this bridge with a spring on it that keeps the tension tight on the butterflies so they're in the proper rest position. With that said, that's a nice thing that we're going to repurpose and put it on the new carburetors. Now, these carburetors look cool. They got a lot of street cred. At the end of the day, they are beat the heck up. Here's the end cone for the #1 cylinder. I don't know if you can see that, but this is absolutely shattered. You might think that doesn't seem to be a big deal, but in fact it is. First of all, these carburetors have no filtration on them. They had these silly screens, which are okay for the street or for the racetrack, but not for the street. you need proper filtration on your carburetors for a multitude of reasons. If this debris is here, it is logical to understand that the debris is going to go through the carburetor and build up on the butterfly in the back, which is going to keep that from seating properly, which is going to give you an air bleed by when you don't want one. Also, without filtration, proper filtration, not this screen thing, that same deposit is going to end up on the valves, which can build up on the valves and in turn effectively have the valves not properly seat. There is no logical reason on a street car that you shouldn't have proper filtration. This is not a filter. This is just basically, you know, chicken wire. Anyhow, so if you see this level of debris build up on your carburetors, it is safe to assume that debris is all throughout the system and potentially in the head. You don't want that to happen. So with that said, cool carburetors in the sense that they're big old 45s, and we might be able to repurpose these later for a race motor or something, but this is just no place for them in a street car. We're going to detune this to a 40 where it should be. We'll get better throttle response, better performance, better progression, better acceleration. Everything's going to be better because we're properly matching the carburetor to the motor instead of going with this testosterone driven concept. Okay, so the noise you're hearing in the background is that we're cleaning up the carburetors we're about to install. You know, we're going to put new gaskets on them and make sure they're properly jetted. Now, again, these are the 45s that are on this motor. Massive, massive carburetor that wasn't even close to being prepared for this car. So we changed the jettings on the carburetors we're swapping out to match what we needed for this 2-liter motor. And that is an important step. It's not just the jetting, it's emulsion tubes, it's air correctors, it's idle jets. All these things need to be double checked to make sure they work in harmony with the motor you're going in with. Now, these are the 45s. Another common, and I wish it wasn't that common, but it is, another common problem that we run into when 45s are put on is oftentimes the head and or the intake mounts are not prepared for 45s. Okay, in this particular case, the head is still ported to a 40 mil, which is fine. Actually a good thing in this case. But the intake mounts, the rubber mounts, they're also 40s. So you have the head that's a 40, you have the mounts that are 40, you have 45 on the carburetors. So effectively you're hitting a wall. The minute the fuel air mixture comes out of the carburetor, it's hitting a wall, which is the mount, because it's reduced in size. Here's the gaskets that were on this matched to those mounts. These are 40s. So you see when they're matched up, and by the way, you know, they were cracked, they were leaking, nothing about this was good. But anyway, when they're matched up, these 40s are cutting off air fuel flow through here. So what happens is that air fuel mixture turbulates coming around this edge, and you're never going to get the proper performance out of the car. The other thing that was somewhat comical is 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's all the gaskets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So one of them was doubled up. Doubling up on the gaskets, this thing just never had a chance. It just never had a chance. So anyway, the point is if you really do feel like you have the need for 45 millimeter carburetors, it's not just a bolt-on application. Not only does the head need to be prepared for it, but you have to have much bigger valves and cams. The motor really needs to justify the need for these massive carburetors, and it is not a simple process. It is a relationship that a machinist or your engine builder is really going to have to make work for you, because when it comes out of here, these need to match perfectly to the intake mounts. If not, if they're slightly off alignment to the intake mounts, you're going to have problems and they're never going to run well. And the intake mounts need to be matched to the head. So all the surfaces need to be absolutely smooth in transition from one piece to the other to the head. So yeah, we just keep finding all sorts of problems with this idea. Okay, so what we did is we went and got a set of used 40 Italian-made Webers from upstairs, and we put them in the hot tank. We mildly rebuilt them, didn't get crazy with them, because at the end of the day, this is just a street car that needs to behave far better than it was. But as you can see, that motor isn't shaking nowhere near what it was earlier when we were on the 45s. The 45s had just about everything you could think of wrong. The engine wasn't prepared for it, the engine wasn't ported to it, the intake mounts weren't 45s, they were 40s, so effectively they were never going to run right no matter what you did with them. But now that we're sitting on these, and I've just started this car up, just dialed it in a little bit. I haven't even really fully tinkered with it, but I want you to listen to the response we're getting out of these now. Settles right back into the RPM like it should. At the end of the day, this is what it should sound like. It's a normal 2-liter with really well set up carburetors just for this motor. This is the way it should be. Now all we gotta do is go chase down some air filters for it, and she's ready to get back on the road. So again, don't be tempted with 45s unless you have the justifiable means for them.